All right, hey everybody. Terribly sorry about the wait for everybody that's here. I'm actually still super shocked. There's still 20 of you in the room, so awesome, and thank you for coming. Chris Mercer's on his way. We had some calendar syncing issues that had occurred, so had just hammered those out, and that is all set. So we will be starting in just about 2 or 3 minutes. Chris is on his way, and he's about to blow your mind with some cool Google Tag Manager information. Again, super sorry about the wait here, and we will be starting shortly. Okay, as we're waiting for Chris, actually, let me create a poll real quick. So take a look at your dashboard, and I want to see who's actually using Google Tag Manager currently. So I'm starting that right now. So if you could just go into your dashboard and check polls and just briefly answer that question. Hey, Chris.
Hello.
So this has been a little bit of a blitzkrieg here, but what I just did was I added into the added a poll asking if people actually use Google Tag Manager at the moment, and I think after this presentation, they're going to be saying a whole lot of yes after that, or they should be.
It's great. It's very good. So I assume I'm coming through okay, loud and clear, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, you sound great.
Excellent. All right, cool, man. So shall we begin?
Yeah, let's do this.
Okay, cool. I figured we kind of chat a little bit about Google Tag Manager and sort of the whys, and then we'll dive into, I'll show you what we have set up under ours for our own site to kind of give everybody a little sneak peek of what it is. And then questions and comments we can kind of put in chat group or however you guys want to do that. So for those who are not familiar with Tag Manager, it's basically created for marketing teams and marketing departments. That was its original creation. So it was enterprise level stuff. The reason they created it is because marketers, right? So you've got marketing who wants to put, let's say, a Facebook pixel on a page. They've got to create a IT desk, have to go to IT and create a help desk ticket. That takes 6 weeks to implement because IT is going around, wants to make sure the pixel's not going to mess up anything, do a lot of beta testing, all that sort of stuff. By the time IT gets a pixel on the page, it's 2 weeks after the campaign ended, right? And so tag managers were created for the marketing team so they could actually take and manage their own code and put tracking pixels on the pages, predominantly, right? So it's all about tracking, and so that marketing can get a little bit more data on the page faster without having to go through IT. For IT, it's great because they're not having to put little things like Facebook pixels on the page all the time, right? Which happen especially with conversion pixels, constantly. So what IT does is they put this little snippet of code. It's very similar to Google Analytics code. It's a little snippet of code. You put it on the pages. Now you've got this master code that controls everything else that you tell it to, okay, and it tracks all sorts of stuff. So that's kind of the 30,000-foot view. What I figured now is we'll go ahead and I'll do a quick screen share and we'll show you ours and explain the different parts of Tag Manager and then do a little deep dive into how some of those come through, give you some examples of how to set one up, and then also some other kind of use cases of what people might want to use them for on their own. Sound fair?
That sounds awesome, Chris. Looking forward to it.
Cool.
You got.
All right. So now the trick is getting the screen share active. So give me just one.
You'll see that over on the sidebar.
Oh yeah, I got it. Yep. So we should be seeing Tag Manager now?
We sure are.
Excellent. Okay. So what you're looking at is sort of that Tag Manager. Once you log into Tag Manager and you've got an active Tag Manager account set up. Now, some of you, when you start, if you're starting especially now, there's now V2, because with all things Google, they constantly change and upgrade. So for those familiar with Classic Analytics, now it's Universal Analytics. It's the same thing a Tag Manager is going through. Most of it is in the user interface. And so what I'm going to explain to you, even though you're looking at an older version here, because our account hasn't migrated over yet, that'll happen over the next couple of months. They'll have migrations. But everything that I'm going to talk about will apply to both. So even if yours looks a little bit different, Some of the labels might be different. I'll point those out where those might be, but the functionality be practically the same. So what we're looking at here is just a list of tags. Okay, so then there's three main sections of Tag Manager. So you've got these tags, which is kind of what the first one is here. You've got rules, and you've got macros. Now, in the new interface, rules and macros are changing. This is how I explain everything. So tags basically is, here's what I want you to do. Okay, it's the command or the action that you want Tag Manager to put out. So in this case, it's testing anything or sending back anything from a Google Analytics page view to reporting a successful e-commerce transaction to displaying a Facebook pixel, all that fun stuff. So that's all the here's what I want you to do stuff. Rules are really just triggers, and that's all they are. That's all they ever have been. And fortunately, everyone over at Google has figured out that's probably what they should call it. So they're actually renaming it to triggers. So if yours says triggers, when you log in the Tag Manager, you now have V2. That's like a dead giveaway. But that's all rules are. It's when should I do this? And you create all these different rules. And then macros are really just variables. And now that's what they call it. They actually just call it variables now. So it's a lot simpler. But a macro is just a kind of a spacer, right? It's a field that you create to hold data. You can see right here, and I'll show you how we use these. We've got a macro set up for our Universal Analytics ID. Okay, so instead of having to type this number in all the time, we just create a macro and then just wherever that macro is, it automatically inserts the right ID. We also did it for our Crazy Egg account, right? There's a Crazy Egg account number, so we can just flip that in whenever we need to. So let's go ahead and dive into the tags, and I'll show you where these are. Now, this works a little differently. If you're used to analytics, you sort of just drop the analytics code and everything starts firing. It's similar to that, but with Tag Manager, it's really, really granular. So you've got immense control over the things that you can track and specifically when they fire. So I'm going to show you some of my favorite stuff here and the ones that you'll most likely use, and then we can go into some more specific use cases. So first I'm clicking where it says Track Page View. Okay, so now we're in tags, and this is a Track Page View tag. All this is doing is reporting back a page view into Google Analytics. So, and this is one of the first things you're ever going to set up as a Tag Manager. So you'll come in here, and this is just a label, right? So you've got tag name, it's a label, you can name it however you want. The only suggestion I will have here as a best practices is keep in mind that these tags are listed alphabetically. So that's why you see stuff like GA-GA-, you see the listeners, we have listeners set up, which I'll get to in a second, the different pixels that we have set up, the different scripts we have set up. So that's why we did it like that, so that because we know that Tag Manager lists them alphabetically and it's easier for us to find kind of what we're looking for. So once you've got your label set up, you just go down and you can actually choose a tag. Now you'll see with most things Google, they're all integrated. So everything Google is kind of integrated in here. So if you do Google Stores, you'll see that's in there. You've got DoubleClick AdWords conversion tracking. Pretty much anything that's Google will be integrated automatically. If it's non-Google, right, something that's like a script or a pixel, like a Facebook pixel, you can use this custom HTML tag. And there are some tagging systems that use images. So this is where you do an image tag. I believe Kensho is one of those as a tracking system. And then we're going to cover some of this other stuff just a little bit later on. But for now, let's just kind of make it simple. So you've got Google Analytics, and we want to integrate with Universal Analytics. So you select Universal Analytics. Then it's going to ask you, okay, everything else that sort of determines here, you know, based on what you select on the tag type. So that's going to ask you, what's the tracking ID? This is that macro that we set up. So everywhere we have this exact, even with the little curly brackets, right? So everywhere we have this, it'll automatically place in our UA number. So now when we're going through, we just can look at our little drop down of all these different macros, all these different variables. We can select that, and we never have to worry about having to type that in or go back and find it or anything like that. We, of course, enable display advertising. Now, in this case, we're telling it we want to track a page view, but you have multiple things you can track. You can track events. So for firing events, you can do transactions for e-commerce. Social medias, you can decorate links and forms. You can do timers, right? So all sorts of fun stuff you can do. In this case, we're just, again, basic. So it's just tell me there's a page view. And then you've got cross-domain tracking, right? Now, one of the greatest things about Tag Manager is how easy it is. And so when you go to Google, and for those who are kind of thinking like, yeah, maybe I don't really need to move to this, all the cool stuff goes through Tag Manager first, normally, and it's a lot easier to set up there. And then they come back and they say, oh, well, if you want to do it through analytics, then you just go in there and you adjust all of your different code and all of your different pages, and you got to do this, that, and the other thing, and you accomplish the same thing. But with Tag Manager, it's like, click this box, right? So everyone's, if you're familiar with cross-domain tracking and you want to make sure that your sessions are crossing, going across in analytics and they're not breaking when you go from the site to the cart and back, right? And this is important, especially when you're trying to attribute traffic sources to domains. So now what we're doing is instead we just go, okay, this is literally just a step-by-step thing. And if I'm going a little bit too fast, we've got the recording, I'm sure. And of course, we've got Google. So just you can Google how to do this. I'll show it all there. But you've got the cookie domain. You just put auto. That means it automatically pulls the domain from site to site, and then you link all the different sites, right? So these are our different sites that we would want to have cross-domain tracking set up on, and that's it. And it's done, and it automatically takes care of everything, and everything tracks through wonderfully, which is awesome. We do have an ability to do tag firing, right? So again, I said you can get really, really granular. You can actually fire these tags in a particular order if you want it. So one of the first things we tell it to do is just go ahead and fire a page view. And all you do is save it, and you've got your tag set up. Now, the other part of that is the rule. Okay, so I'm going to jump back into that tag real quick. So where we've got the tag set up all here on the left-hand side, or right, this little middle column. On the right-hand side, you'll see up here you've got firing rules. This is the trigger, right? This is when do I fire this tag? When do I take this action of whatever this tag is defining? And if you click on it, it says all pages, you can see we've got a rule. It's a regex rule. For those not familiar with regular expressions, they are super useful and a really great way to filter Google Analytics. But in this case, these little symbols, the little dot asterisk, all it really means is everything. So wherever there is tag manager code, this particular tag manager code, I want you to trigger this tag. That's what we're basically saying. And with page, since it's a page view, we want that, right? So anywhere there's tag manager code, that's where we want. So that's kind of the behind the scenes of a very simple tag, right? That page view tag. For those two, I want to show you. This is the tag manager code right there, right? So instead of Universal Analytics code or Google Analytics code, if you're using Classic, you would take that off and you'd put this on. So this actually replaces that, and now Google Analytics data is being fired and reported according to whatever you tell the tag manager to do.
So Chris, quick question there. Say, for instance, they add the GTM code in addition to Universal Analytics. Do you get double counts, or what happens there? Okay.
Yep. That's why you migrate over. So initially what we'll do is we'll just have like you can always do it, and I've never seen it not work. So it's a very, very simple thing to set up. But initially what we'll do is we'll just confirm that the tag manager is ready to go. In fact, let me show you this because it'll make a little more sense of how that happens. So you see here where you've got this little versions, right? You've got a version, you've got publish. So as soon as I save a tag or change a tag, it doesn't actually do anything. It's kind of like WordPress. If you use a WordPress site, you have to publish the page, right? In this case, publish the new tags, publish the changes in order for it to become active. But it becomes instantly active once you publish. So we can set everything up and kind of go like, okay, are you ready? We're going to go, and then have them take off their analytics code or comment it out if it's like an includes file or something. We hit publish, and at that point, we jump into the real-time reports and just make sure everything's working in analytics. And again, for simple tags like that, it's never not worked. For more complicated setups, you might want to go to like a staging server, dev server, just to verify it and then push it live. Depending upon what your setup what your setup is.
All right, cool. Thanks. Yeah, because it looks like a lot of the people on here, 60% of the people watching right now don't use Google Tag Manager. So I wanted to make sure that was known.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Yeah, and any questions, I mean, especially for those who are unfamiliar, for me at least, this was something where I knew that it was useful, and every time I kind of came at it, it was like, wow, like this is too much, I'm just going to go back to my analytics, right? Because I was very comfortable with Universal Analytics and everything was kind of set up and mostly working. And, to get pixels on the page took a little while because you had to go through dev, but whatever, no big deal. Once I really sat down and committed to Tag Manager and playing with it, and the new version, for those of you who are going to start with that, you're going to be kind of lucky because it's a totally different interface. It looks pretty cool. This older version is clunky. It's kind of googly, right? Like it's got that Google UI to it. But once you get through that and you understand, really, this is three parts. It's what do you want me to do, which is the tags. When should I do it, which is the rules or the triggers. And what variables should I pass on, if any, right, which is the macro section here. And once you sort of understand the flow of that, you can get really, really specific. I'll give you another example. Event tracking, something super useful for analytics, to have events firing into analytics to know when people do certain things. Before, you would have to take an HTTP, or maybe you got a hyperlink of a button, you got to grab that button, you got to put little event code around it and say, send these 4 fields whenever this button's clicked. But you're going in there and you're asking dev to hard code stuff. Now, the first thing you do is you basically turn on what they call listener, which all this does, and I'll show it to you here. It's a tag, right, called a link click listener. And all we do is we tell it to listen for a link click. That's it. That's all it does. It listens for when somebody clicks a link. And this is really all it does. And it fires on all pages. Now, then what we set up is a tag. This is internal click, right? So we set up a tag, Universal Analytics tag, only this one is an event tag, Okay, see down here it says now event, where it used to say page view, we switched it to event. In the event, we tell it, report back internal link as a category, so we show it as internal link, report the element, right, and the element ID. So we got a little CSS data here if we want it. Element's important because that's the URL they clicked on. So we actually know where they're going now. And this is the important part. This is an example of rules now. Remember, the rules are just the triggers. When do I fire? We tell it, only do this when you report back that there was a click. And that's where the link click listener is there. That's when this event equals link click. It means, yes, there has been a link click. So what do I do now? And it says, okay, well, if there's a link click and the element, right, the element URL contains Seriously Simple. So in our case, our site is Seriously Simple Marketing. So anything that contains Seriously Simple, I want them to say, okay, well, they're clicking on something within our site. So report it back as an internal link. Now, I have another one set up that is switched to where it says does not contain Seriously Simple. That is an external link. Exactly. Now I can tell if they're going off my site or on my site, and they're easily categorized as two different groups. And all of my links are clicked, or all my links are events, every single one of them. Like that. Took about 30 seconds to set this up. That's not true. It took about 2.5 minutes.
Exactly. Much better than I remember trying to get event tracking even at smaller companies set up without using Tag Manager, and I mean that sometimes could take a couple days to maybe even like a full business week of jumping through hoops to get everything put together.
Absolutely, yep, it's absolutely insane. And with this, again, this is where you're determining. So it's kind of like, well, how does Google know what to call it? Here's where it is. So I could just as easily say internal link, type in a label here, and that label will start going on. But because of this macro ability, right? Because you've got the ability to use macros, it's automatically dynamically inserting whatever the element is. In this case, the URL that they were clicking on. So super cool stuff you can do. For those who are using, and I give you another use case, I don't have one on this site, but just to kind of give it as an example, if you're there's a system called Nadigans out there. So Nadigans will take Facebook conversion pixels and sort of manage those off on its side. And what Nadigans likes to do is it likes to get dynamic data firing back through the pixel. So it'll fire its pixel, and it'll ask for the user ID and the email and maybe how much they purchased, and all that data. That data needs to come back through the pixel. Well, with Google Tag Manager, no big deal. You set up macros, and then you tell it, okay, well now insert the user ID here, insert the transaction amount here, insert whatever else here, and it all goes back and fires through the pixel, as opposed to having to hard code anything. So again, super simple to break out. The other thing I'll show you too is just these are all kind of operate the same, but just to kind of show you, we've got our Seriously Simple Analytics course, right? So I'm going to pull up this Facebook conversion pixel. So here's a Facebook conversion pixel. Again, you would switch it. Remember this menu here where this is where we chose our universal analytics. This time we're doing custom HTML. This is just the pixel that we got from Facebook. No changes, just copy and paste. Put in the Facebook pixel, and then we tell it, again, going back to the rule, because it's a conversion pixel. If this was a custom audience pixel, we would say fire on all pages. But in this case, this one is just to be firing when the URL contains this in the URL, which is our thank you page for people who purchase the Seriously Simple Analytics course. Make sense?
So actually, I just got a question here. And so people were asking if there was any sort of training materials or books you'd recommend on Google Tag Manager, because as soon as you start breaking into the macros and the firing rules, I think people might get overwhelmed, and I'm wondering if there's anything you could recommend there.
Yeah, I think the way that I learned it. So the short answer is none that I know of that are super organized. The way that I learned it was going through a lot of blog posts, and I can definitely drop in the chat some incredible blog posts to start. I will also drop in there's a great, for those on Google+, there's an incredible Google Tag Manager community that's on Google+. So give me just 1 second. And
I feel like Google Tag Manager was kind of like the left out child of the groups of things that we all talk about, especially in the conversion world. I mean, we always talk about our analytics tools, our kind of qualitative tools, and all those other things. I feel like Tag Manager got the kind of the short end of the stick, but the possibilities and powers that are in this thing are, I mean, it's just amazing.
It is absolutely amazing what you're able to do. It really, really is. So this is, I'm going to make this public. So this is like my personal hero. When it comes to Tag Manager, follow this guy. Yeah. He is unbelievable. Oh my word, unbelievable. And I'm going to drop a real quick link to the community too, so you can see it in Google+. Because again, I ask questions all the time. You'll see I've got 2 questions in there now. And these guys, like, what's great about this Google Plus community is it is the guys who build Google Tag Manager, right? So it's not, I mean, there's moderators in there who are that use it on a day-to-day basis, but it's actually the guys from Google that are in here. So people do feature requests, they do bug reports, they do all sorts of cool stuff, and a lot of times there's chances for some advanced knowledge that you would not otherwise see. And that is here. So take a second to join that, because it is unbelievable. It's a really great resource.
It's interesting to see, oh hey, look, a Google Plus community that people use. My gosh.
Yeah, I know. It's really funny because like the AdWords, the Tag Manager, the analytics, those things blow up in Google Plus, right?
Yeah.
And it's tough to find those anywhere else. But consider the audience. Consider
exactly.
Anything.
People were saying since its inception they were like, oh yeah, it's for Google Plus is for the techies and it's techie stuff, so that makes sense. Esther had a question for you. She was saying, is this mostly for tracking analytics or for team task management? I mean, the answer to that really, it's for, analytics, conversion activity, and those types of things. It's not on the team task management like others were, like she had asked. So the latter, it's not for that. So,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Like like in our case, you can see we used it for Crazy Egg. Like you can install Crazy Egg just by dumping it into the into your page on the footer. You could use a WordPress plugin. We use Tag Manager.
So essentially, if you have this set up right, any sort of tool that requires you to drop code into your heads and head tag or body tag, you can take that off of Dev's plate by having GTM put in place and setting up rule parameters around.
That's exactly right.
Okay, perfect.
That is exactly right. So, like for example, we wanted to play with Heap Analytics. We could put this technically on a client site. Mm-hmm. Right? We could look at Hotjar. We use Hotjar. We've got Clicky as another example. It's not on this site, but we've got Clicky. So if we wanted to put Clicky all of a sudden and track some things through Clicky, we could without having to go to the client's dev and say, okay, well now we need to do this, and it takes forever to get it done. We can just put it on. Now there are multiple layers of Tag Managers, so I'm trying not to dive too deep. But some of the important features to know are, we go back to these little version sections here. So we can just name these, right? So it's really easy to select a version and you just name it, right? Call it whatever you want. And this is basically us having versioning, just letting us know, okay, here's what we changed, here's what we added, all the different stuff on there, right? So we sort of have a history. But what's cool about versioning is when you publish, it'll create a new version for you. This is important because there are occasions, right? It's incredibly rare, but it does happen where you publish something and then something, all of a sudden a weird space shows up on a page, right? That wasn't there before, because maybe that new piece of code wasn't completely right, or there was a semicolon in there where there shouldn't have been. And so then you just go back to it's like a big giant undo button that lasts forever, right? Unlimited versions of undo. So you just undo it and then you're back. And so even as a marketer, which marketers can kind of freak out, and that's why IT doesn't like it, because of the whole like, oh, you're gonna take down our site. But even if something went horrendously wrong, it would take about 3 seconds to just undo it and then publish that one that was just working, and then everything comes back to normal. So as IT, there's kind of like a no fear thing for IT. And when I first talk to IT people, there's a control thing, right? Because it's kind of like, oh, you're in my code. But once they really understand it and see how it works, it becomes more of that, oh my God, you're not going to ask me to do this crap anymore. Thank you. I can just focus on doing the new cart design that I'm trying to get done, as opposed to dropping pixels and putting on Clicky and doing especially around event tagging, right?
Oh,
so they don't have to do the event tags anymore. So they love that. So super cool feature. The other thing that I want to chat about briefly is something called the data layer, which is an important component to Tag Manager. And what the data layer is, it's best if I actually just Google it and show you how this works. So what this is, and you can obviously play along at home, do the same thing. But what the Tag Manager has is it's got the ability to go back and pull data from what they call the data layer. And essentially what happens is when the page loads, you put the data layer up top in the head tag, and then you've got Google Tag Manager in the body, and that's when all the Google Tag Manager codes start firing and following all their little orders that you set up based upon all the rules, right? So with the data layer, it basically is just a placeholder for data. It is what it sounds like, right? So you can say, okay, well now this is a sign-up page. This is a visitor type of high value. You can start tagging all this stuff. You can put in e-commerce data, right? So you could put in there. We've had clients use a hashed user ID. So the whole thing is, how do we track a specific user ID, right? So they take the email and they hash the email, so it's encrypted, and then they make that this user ID field. Well, now that shows up in the data layer all the time, and then we pull that from Tag Manager and put it in the pixels and fire it back. So all of this stuff on our end, like once that dev, and this would be something that the dev does have to do, right? They have to set this up for e-commerce and all that. But once this is set up, in most of the cases, they're pulling this stuff from the URLs and they figure out how to do all that. Or they're doing it from APIs or however they do it, right? It doesn't really matter as long as they get it done. If once it shows up in the data layer, you can do all sorts of stuff with it, and it will take you, again, 2 to 3 minutes of once you've practiced with this. Now, in the beginning, again, it can feel overwhelming. That's natural. Because Tag Manager, it's like analytics. When you first walk into analytics, it's huge. You see all this stuff, right? With Tag Manager, you play with it a few times, but it's like riding a bike. You'll get the feel for the balance, and then you'll feel how easy it is to actually get this stuff done. And again, in the beginning, is that true? No, because there's a learning curve. But once you get past that, oh man, it is unbelievable. And going back to your question about the course, we're actually going to be adding a module into the Series of Simple Analytics course for this specifically.
Oh, awesome! That's great, actually. Yeah, and I think what's interesting about this, when it comes down to even analytics, or I mean, everything's just so absolutely massive that it comes down to you need to be able to customize and be able to find the reports and get the tags that you want. So as you get used to using this thing, you have to start putting it together for yourself. So you're customizing there. So you could see Chris's Tag Manager account isn't going to be the same as like Esther's account when you get there. So just remember that there will be the right way to set your triggers up and all those things. But just because one person's tracking a particular piece of data doesn't necessarily mean you need to be doing that as well, which I think is shown best whenever you use custom reports in Google Analytics. People just use the ones that they need.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's a really, really good point. And again, it's when you start learning kind of these cool tricks, like I talked briefly about the timer. So at bounce rate, right? With analytics, you've got bounce rate, and really Google needs something to bounce off of in order to determine bounce rate. So you see a lot of things show 100% bounce rate where the person could have spent a whole bunch of time on the page, but because Google never recorded any interaction with the page, it's a bounce rate. So you could set a timer like we did here. We set a timer that fires after 30 seconds, and then when that timer fires after 30 seconds, we then set an event, right? That says, okay, now report back they were on the page 30 seconds, and make it an interaction. Report it as an interaction. So now Google goes, okay, well, they've spent some time on the page. It's not a bounce. Now we can make this a minute or 2 minutes. It might be different upon what you're looking for. For us, if somebody's on the page 30 seconds, it's time enough to know whether or not the data was there and they're just maybe trying to find something. If they were there less than 30 seconds, okay, yeah, we want to know it was a bounce, so it's useful. We don't want it to make it 2 seconds because maybe nothing's a bounce. Well, now we've lost meaningful data, right? We want to know if people are leaving, but we don't need. If somebody spent 4 minutes on there, I want to know that was not a bounce, and so that's what we do things like that. It's called an adjusted bounce rate, but it'll help make your analytics data that much more useful.
No, very, very, very cool. All right, so I know we started a half hour late. These generally go a half hour, so sorry this turned into an hour-long spectacle for everybody that stuck around. I think those who did stick around, we're glad they did. I'm glad my calendar eventually synced up. So Chris, in the last couple of minutes, I guess, what would you say, I mean, in order, like, kind of encouraging words to get started, I suppose, and then you gave some resources already. So kind of where would you go from where should they go from here for the 60% of the audience that aren't using Google Tag Manager?
If you're brand new, the very first thing I would do is I would go to Tag Manager, right? Just Google Tag Manager, go to it and sign up for an account. Create the account and play with it. Put it on your site. So the most you're going to learn, I mean, yes, you can go through people's blogs and all that sort of stuff, but initially get the account signed up, just sort of get an idea for what the process is. You don't have to open up anything, you don't have to create a new tag, but at least have that account set up. Once you have that set up, then I would take a look at some of these blogs. And I know some other people have dropped in some great URLs in there too, so take a look at those, poke around, then kind of go like, okay, now that I've got my little sandbox over here, if you want to create a WordPress install that's kind of off on the side, if you want to do that, you can. But really, it's getting a feel for it, because once you understand, right, tags are just, here's what I want you to do, the rules are just triggers of when to do that, and then macros you may or may not use based upon if you need to hold the data. Like, that's really it. Most of you will use rules and triggers. And do something simple, like take off, if you're using something like Crazy Egg now, take off Crazy Egg off your page and then fire that through Google Tag Manager just to get a feel for it. It's baby steps, but once you get the feel for it, you literally get that balance down. You'd be like, oh, I kind of see what I can do here. And then you can get into more and more advanced stuff. And whatever the answer is that you're trying to track, even something like what they call an Ajax refresh, where if you've ever had a client where the URL doesn't change ever, and they go through the steps of the funnel, it drives me nuts because it's like Google can't see this, right? It's just sort of the same page view over and over again. You can track stuff like that using what they call history listeners in Google Tag Manager, and then fire into analytics. There's all sorts of incredible things that you have this power to control as a conversions expert. You can go in there and pull this data so that you can start making more meaningful decisions based on that data for your clients. So but going back to the very first steps, start an account, create that account first, then go back in and start researching it, because at least then you've got your sandbox set up where you can play with some stuff.
All right, great. Thank you so much for jumping on, Chris, and everyone else. Chris, if they want to get in touch with you at all, how should they do that? People.
Yeah, they can just find me at SeriouslySimpleMarketing.com is the blog that we have over there, and I'm just Mercer at SeriouslySimpleMarketing.com.
All right, great. Thanks everybody for showing up. This was recorded. It will be put up on theconversionshow.com in the next few days, probably tomorrow, I'm guessing. Thanks again, and we'll have an email out to everybody for next month's edition. Okay, everybody, happy testing, happy converting, and happy reporting.
Happy Tag Manager.
Woo! Happy Tag Manager. All right, have a good one, everybody.
Take care.